All right, IU fans, look, basketball season's been of a roller coaster ride. The Hoosiers lost to Auburn in blowout fashion in Atlanta. They've had a couple of nice Big Ten wins to this point. Obviously, a big Kansas game on Saturday. But we'll get to basketball after we see how the Hoosiers do against the Jayhawks. The fact of the matter is, the talk of the town in Bloomington right now has to do with the football program, as Curt Cignetti, before he even coaches a game at IU, brings back a couple of key returners, has an intriguing name at QB1, and he's putting the Hoosiers in a position to win as early as September of 2024. Matt and I are going to dive into the massive news swirling around IU football. Donaven McCulley and Carter Smith are back. Curtis Work is your quarterback. What does all of that mean? How do the Hoosiers stack up in the Big Ten? What's still left for this IU football program? Matt and I are going to dive into all of that and so much more here on episode 318 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Friday, December 15, 2023. I'm your host, Nithin Krishnan. Here with me tonight is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, Carter Smith is back. Donaven McCulley is back. Curtis Work is Indiana's quarterback. There have been a couple of departures from this team, but what are your initial observations as the Hoosiers under Curt Cignetti try to get this thing on track in year one of his tenure?
Yeah, so going into this offseason, I was expecting like a B minus performance from the transfer portal.
Sure.
Again, you have, literally, it's like every school is looking for a new QB. It's complete and utter madness in the let's call it what it is now. This is free agency.
It is. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And free agency is crazy in college football. So I'm sorry. Going into this offseason, I thought, maybe we'll get like one or two really good players. I think we're going to lose basically everybody, get a bunch of guys from James Madison, get a couple guys from other people's coaching connections, and maybe, just maybe, we'll win like 6-7 games next year. Make a bowl game, scramble it together, show that you can win with guys with less talent, and then go like next summer, be like, hey, guys with talent, this is what we could do.
Reasonable.
But you've gone and gotten now one of the best players from the MAC and Rourke. You've gotten Donaven McCulley, who was one of the best receivers in the Big Ten last year, who I, for one, thought was just gone.
And Georgia had interest. UCLA had interest. Texas A&M, Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin. Big deal.
I had already sold him off to Michigan, right? Like I in my mind, I thought he was already a Wolverine. You've already gone and seen AJ Barner have success with the Wolverines, and he'll be playing on New Year's Day in a top 4 game.
Yeah.
You see Tuttle there as well. So you've seen guys go from IU to Michigan have success. So I just thought, given that he was going to be supposed to be visiting them officially this weekend, I thought that was going to be basically a done deal, wrapped up. Jim Harbaugh was going to get a good receiver for once.
But Collins not bad.
Sorry, they're all right, but like I think McCulley's a much better than any of the guys that they've had recently, especially on a one-on-one level. And now, you get him back in the fold, but I really want to know what Cignetti said to him. Like he seems very bought in, so I would like to know what the pitch was.
That's going to be a Netflix documentary soon, right? Just like recruiting conversations. That's just it's gonna happen.
It has to.
It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, they need to make it like a Love Island dating show, but for college football coaches and
Dion, right? That's Colorado for sure.
Yeah, Dion and all the recruits in the portal and all the craziness that happens there. Yeah, that definitely needs to be a documentary.
I'm blown away, Matt. I honestly did not think we would see Carter Smith in an Indiana uniform
No,
again
for
in
sure
the
not. No.
2024 season. Somebody with 795 snaps at left tackle in 2023 as a redshirt freshman. Everyone was banging down his door. Donaven McCulley, no one had more touchdown receptions in Big Ten play last season, conference games, outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean,
that's not a bad person to lose to.
We're talking about, a generational wide receiver prospect who, by the way, for those who may have forgotten, was shut down by Indiana in week 1. All I'm saying is, for a team that won 3 games, Indiana had a lot of highly coveted players. And you and I talked about it on this podcast. We talked about it the day after Tom Allen got fired. We said this team had plenty of good players. They were woefully mismanaged. They were underutilized. Donaven McCulley was a quarterback for multiple seasons. He had 1 catch against Ohio State. He had 0 against Rutgers. And it's no surprise that Indiana's offense looked insanely anemic in both of those games. Of course, the offensive coordinator eventually got fired. When you have a 3-9 football team, you should not routinely be hearing Penn State and Michigan and Nebraska and Florida State and Ole Miss and Colorado and Mississippi State, big time Power 5 schools, A&M, going like crazy to try to get your guys. That's not how it's supposed to be. Tom Allen totally lost his way after that 2020 season. And it goes to show just how quickly Curt Cignetti can potentially turn things around, that in year 0, his off-season 0, it's not his off-season 1. That happens after some games get played in 24. This is the off-season before the first season. He's winning recruiting battles as a former FCS coach against Mike Elko and Jim Harbaugh and James Franklin and really legitimate football names and football programs.
This shouldn't be surprising, Nithin. This shouldn't be surprising. This was the one thing that we all banked on him being able to do well, right? Because he was so good at recruiting at Alabama.
Get in the conversation. He's someone who got Julio Jones. He got Russell Wilson to NC State. He just needs a meeting. He just needs a conversation. And I don't care how you do it. Tom Allen reached success with the LEO mindset and with easy to remember phrases and sayings and things like one-liners like that. Curt Cignetti does it differently. I think you can tell that through a handful of months. When he speaks to the media, it's different than how it used to be with Kevin Wilson or with Tom Allen or with Bill Lynch. When he speaks to the players, we don't have an idea of what those conversations are like. That's the thing that's got to be on Netflix in a few years. But what we do know is that in-state prospects have said that this staff does things differently than the previous one does.
Yep.
So in a nutshell, even before a game is even played, you're seeing Indiana, Matt, have a very intriguing 2-deep as far as their depth chart is concerned on December 15th. What we haven't seen yet is what kind of exodus takes place out of James Madison, a really good football program, once their bowl game finishes a week from Saturday.
Right.
And all of a sudden it goes, okay, what kind of players will the Hoosiers have here? How will they stack up? The schedule's a little bit lighter. All of this is really intriguing.
A little bit lighter.
I mean, you still have Michigan and Ohio State, Matt, but you get Penn State swapped out for Washington. You get Louisville swapped out for Western Illinois. Obviously, you're right. It does ease up quite a bit. It's always nice to have another Big Ten West team in there like Nebraska. Of course, Purdue coming off a bit of a difficult season. They won't have Deion Burks next year. He's off to Oklahoma. So you're right. The schedule will have a couple of favors thrown in there for the Hoosiers. I want to talk a little bit about Curtis Rourke, Matt. I mean, you're talking about a guy who comes in from Ohio. At the end of the 22 season, there were a lot of folks who were interested in seeing him potentially take the leap to the NFL. The issue is he tore his ACL at the end of the season. And for those of you that are asking, okay, how is a guy with a PFF grade of 91 over 2 seasons not getting, every single powerhouse school not banging down his door this portal window? It's because he did come off of a tough knee injury at the end of the 22 season, and he had a couple of shaky games in the 23 campaign with the Ohio Bobcats. With that said, Matt, this is a guy who's thrown nearly 1,000 pass attempts over the course of the last 3 seasons. A quarterback with experience, Matt Lukens. What a breath of fresh air. What are your takeaways as far as Curtis Rourke is considered? And this is someone who I think you can pretty much put in Sharpie right now as Indiana's QB1 going into 24, correct?
If he's not, we either have the next coming of Peyton Manning, or there's something, he's injured, right? Like there's no way he's not starting for the Hoosiers next year.
Do you think Cignetti's gonna hold it as a secret from Florida International in week 1?
Yeah, I think it's probably best that Florida International, doesn't really know. It's
strategic reasons.
Spicy matchup, Florida International Panthers versus.
It's an advantage for your opponent, Matt, if they know who your quarterback is.
Yeah. Whatever. Anyways, very glad that the staff is probably not going to do the same things that the other staff did about certain things. But anyways. Look, Rourke fits the profile of everything that Cignetti is looking for in a QB. Not just the fact that he's like a pro-level-ish prospect, right? But he's a scrambler. So his recruiting profile says pocket passer. He's not he can be a pocket passer. If you ask him to be a pocket passer, he could be a pocket passer. But at Ohio, that's almost at Iowa. He would be a little bit
insulting to Ohio.
Yeah, okay? That's actually
they actually have a functional.
Ohio had a functioning offense last year. They ran RPO basically every single play. It was either hand the ball off, take it himself, or throw every single play. And then if they were running it, it was a read option on every single play. And Rourke, especially, and I was watching a couple highlights from I think the Toledo game was another pretty decent team in the MAC last year.
Awesome
Akron,
that's an understatement, yeah.
As well. He was running a lot. He had picked up a lot of really important first downs by himself, made really good reads out of the read option.
It's experience matters. Is that what you're telling me?
I'm saying not only are you getting experience, but you're getting high level experience in Rourke, and a guy that can play any kind of way you want. But if you go and look at the way James Madison played last year, they ran RPOs and read options a lot as well. I mean, in modern football, you kind of have to, but it was a significant part of the Duke's game plan on offense last year. And he's a guy that's going to come in graded 90 plus in PFF, running this
over 2 seasons,
basically running the same offense. So he's going to step in day one. He's going to be very familiar with the concepts. He's got to work with his receivers. Now he has number 1 wide receiver in McCulley, who's, I will go out on a limb and say he's a better wide receiver than anybody he's played with so far in his career. And he's made a lot of MAC receivers, no offense to MAC receivers, look pretty good over the couple years he's played at Ohio.
Now, what's interesting is one of his best receivers from last year at Ohio, Miles Cross, is a target from Curt Cignetti and his staff here at Indiana. Yep. Wow, things make sense. It's always nice when logic.
That's one, very logical, but two, having a number 2 wide receiver on the roster that he has some familiarity with will help him in the offseason, because then he doesn't have to run routes with this guy, right? Because he's already done that before. He can. He still will, but he can run fewer with him and more with the new guys. So therefore, his relationship with the newer guys come the start of next year is going to be even tighter than it would have been if he has to split his time evenly between 4 or 5 guys.
There you go. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, Curtis Rourke, I got to make sure I don't call him Nathan Rourke. His older brother Nithin is kind of a legend in the CFL with the BC Lions. And you mentioned, Matt, that Curtis Rourke has pro-ish potential. He will go pro. The thing is, Curtis Rourke, at a bare minimum, a Canadian hero, he will at a bare minimum show up in the CFL after his one season at Indiana comes up here. It's always great to see a little international flavor in college and pro football, and that's exactly what Curtis Rourke brings to the table. I believe Ohio put out a release last season that he was the top prospect in CFL draft rankings. So if nothing else, Curtis Rourke will be either in the CFL or the NFL after his one season at Indiana. Fun fact, other quarterbacks to win MAC Player of the Year include Tyree Jackson, who ended up going into the NFL, Logan Woodside, same deal there, Dan Lefevre. How about Greg Jennings, the wide receiver who made big things happen with Green Bay, Ben Roethlisberger, Byron Leftwich, Chad Pennington, of course, Randy Moss, who did massive things at Marshall when they were in the MAC. Curtis Rourke accomplished exactly that in 2022 with the Ohio Bobcats. Tore his ACL at the end of the year, came back to Ohio for 2023, and the Bobcats weren't all that terrible. Okay, folks, they were 9-3, very solid team as far as the MAC is concerned. Wins over Iowa State.
Iowa State. Yep.
You know, now to Ohio's credit, they had established themselves as a program enough where they were able to get Iowa State to travel to the great town of Athens, Ohio, to play a college football game. But hey, the Bobcats do deserve credit. They were able to win that game basically as a 1-point underdog. And then your Ohio Bobcats went to Akron and won by double digits, something that Indiana would have really struggled to do last year when you consider everything all coming together. But Rourke last year had a couple of 300-yard passing games. You definitely love to see those performances against Kent State and Miami, Ohio. Miami, Ohio was a team that made the MAC championship game. And so, in fact, they went on to win the MAC championship. And Curtis Rourke did a very nice job in that game, going for over 300. And back in 2022 against Fordham, when he went up against former Hoosier DeKeys Carter, Rourke threw for over 500 yards, setting a single game Ohio passing record. So this is someone 6'3". He's able to deliver from the pocket. He's able to deliver on rollouts. He's got a little bit of a scrambliness to him. He had about 60 rushing yards in that win against Iowa State, so he can do it against Power 5 opposition. And if he wanted to, he could have gone to other Power 5 programs in this transfer cycle. So Curt Cignetti clearly knows the kind of quarterback that he wanted. I'm so excited to see someone play quarterback for Indiana that for once is not an experiment. Michael Penix was an experiment, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Peyton Ramsey was not a sure thing, really, until the 2019 season. And remember, Peyton Ramsey was Indiana's backup in 2019. It was really the 18 season where you had some kind of experience level at quarterback with Ramsey. But of course, he just didn't have the physical tools that someone like Michael Penix had. Connor Bazelak, that was a bit experimental. He had a COVID season at Missouri where he went out and did some things. Indiana brought him in. Hey, what can you do here? Don't even get me started with last season, right? Or Taven Jackson and Brendan Sorsby, where interestingly, Indiana made the right decision in week 1, but then in a very circuitous classic fashion, went to Taven Jackson for a few games, threw in Brendan Sorsby at the end of Maryland. Then he figured things out and was really solid for final 6 weeks. And now, of course, all of that work is pretty much for no payoff because Sorsby's now the Cincinnati Bearcats. Yep. So in a nutshell, right, you see logic, you see common sense, you see an understanding, even from a fan perspective, from an outsider perspective, as to what Curt Cignetti is doing here. And it's not over, as we mentioned. He has got a ton of offers out there. You're also talking quite a bit to 2024 high school prospects. Tyler Cherry, a 4-star quarterback from Center Grove High School, decommitted from Duke. Center Grove, obviously, an institution that has been a common thread, that has shared a common thread with Indiana University over the last handful of years with Taven and Trace Jackson Davis.
Yeah, I like the Center Grove High School. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, so not too shabby there. And now we'll see if Indiana is able to snag Tyler Cherry, who's going to conduct an official visit, right, Matt? That's what you were saying this weekend. So,
They're doing an in-home visit with him.
In-home visit this weekend. So there you go. We'll be able to see how that goes. It looks like it might be a 2-horse race for Cherry as far as Indiana versus Michigan State. And so, we're all excited to see how that goes. Man, Indiana also got Justice Ellison to commit, but the Hoosiers did lose guys like Matthew Bedford, Khalil Benson, both of those individuals off to Colorado, Trent Howland to Minnesota, Brendan Sorsby to Cincinnati, Lewis Moore to Ole Miss. Is there anything you're seeing as far as the recruiting style or a common theme or a common pattern from Coach Cignetti and Coach Shanahan and Coach Sinceri as far as the kind of guys that they want to bring back from last year's Indiana team and the kind of guys that they're saying, hey, you know what? We may not want, it might not be in our best interest to have you on a roster next year. Let's maybe mutually part ways. Is there any kind of common trend, common theme you're seeing in the guys that Cignetti and staff want to have back on this team next year?
It's all guys that are from the Big Ten footprint. Really. McCulley from Indianapolis, Rourke, he's from Canada, but played at Ohio University. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Our left tackle, I believe,
of course, Carter Smith, right?
Carter
that
Smith,
Big Ten mindset from Ohio.
I believe he's from Ohio. Right. He's from the Big Ten. Again, all these guys. They're Tyler Cherry's from Indianapolis. It's all people from the local area, right? That understand Big Ten football, understand Power 5 football, and are wanting to help change Indiana to make them a viable football program. That's the recruiting profile I'm looking at. For the other staff, I love my Florida high school football players. Trust me, I do. I do. And I grew up in Florida.
Sure.
I think Florida has the best football in the country, bar none. I think it's better than Texas. And if you think it's otherwise, then you're just a Texan. But and so you saw the last staff was heavily recruited Florida.
Of course.
And this staff so far hasn't done that. I assume that they will go down south because, they're just kind of built different down there for football. But so far, the staff has been really looking at local guys.
That's a really interesting point, Matt, because Bedford is from Tennessee. Khalil Benson also from I believe Mississippi.
They not let them go, but they basically have without too much of a fight.
Well, you got to have a vision, right? You got to have a vision, of course. Yeah. Are you going to say Curt Cignetti doesn't want Khalil Benson or Matt Bedford on his offensive line? Of course not. But, it's one of those things where maybe as far as the priority list, it's, hey, let's get Carter Smith back 800 snaps at left tackle. Let's get Donaven McCulley back, big body, super skilled receiver that you might even say is just scratching the surface. Sorsby, we know what he did at the end of last season, but perhaps Cignetti says, hey, we're not sure how sustainable that is. Let's get someone like Curtis Rourke, who's thrown 1,000 passes over 3 seasons, and he's been able to win games. It makes a lot of sense. Lewis Moore comes from Trenton Howland is a Chicago area kid, but at the same time, Chicago State is the primary program right now in the area. So shout out Chris Collins.
Lord. No, Nithin, I think people really should read into what the staff is trying to do next year by the quarterback acquisition, right? If you're trying to build up the program from the ground up, right? And you go, you know what? Next year, I'm a new coach. I'm getting a 3-9 football team that nobody thinks is good. There's some decent players on it, but there's no pressure on Cignetti here to go win 10 games next year. Right?
It's true.
You don't have to.
He puts pressure on himself, but that's
I was going to say he puts pressure on himself. But to read into the quarterback situation specifically, this staff is trying to win in year 1. Okay, they're not trying to build for the future. They're not trying. In a way they are, but they're not trying to. Let's let Taven Jackson work it out next year, right? Let's see what we have in Sorsby. They kind of let them both, or they haven't let Taven Jackson go. Taven Jackson's still in the program, but they kind of let Sorsby go, right? And
But
they
I
go
wouldn't be
in.
surprised if they sat there and told Taven Jackson, "Hey, look, man, one more year.
Mm-hmm.
Let's learn. Let's not go waffling here. Let's not go back and forth. Take a seat, learn a thing or two about football at the collegiate level. We're not going to throw you to the wolves. 2025, let's crank it up." I don't know. I'm just speculating, but I can clearly see that potentially being a conversation that Cignetti and Shanahan had with Taven Jackson.
That's true, but back to my point basically is like they went and got Rourke because they think Rourke can help them win 2 or 3 extra games next year, not even just for bowl eligibility, but to cement the program as a bit of an up and coming thing, so that they can
Kansas, Duke,
launch. Yeah,
Kentucky.
Kansas or Duke, so they can launch themselves into a better recruiting cycle starting next year, right? Because they're going to go after they're already going after a top 300 QB in Tyler Cherry, and they might get him, right? They haven't
Sure.
decommit saying he's their first visit, right?
You flipped
They
a
might end
number
up,
of James Madison 24 guys
yeah,
to come play for Indiana.
24 guys. But I'm talking like he's a guy that likes to recruit at a level that's just slightly higher than the previous staffs. If you go and look at all the recruiting classes of his previous jobs, and then you go look after he took over, there's always been a like, okay, James Madison gets some low 3 stars, whatever, to boom, they're snagging guys away from some Power 5 programs, right? Um, and so you're gonna go from, okay, we got a 4-star, that's great, or we have 3 or 4 4-stars. I would be surprised if you start seeing Indiana in the top like 20 of recruiting rankings start as early as next year, especially if they can go out on the field and win 8, 9, 10
Well,
games next year. Like that's not out of reach here.
no, we're gonna talk about stars in a second, Matt, because I think
Yeah.
that is important to discuss here. We'll talk about that in just a sec. But first, it's time for who won the week this past week in IU sports. We're gonna keep a football theme, actually. How about defensive lineman Andre Carter, who's off to Orlando for the Hula Bowl? I'm really intrigued by a few of these IU seniors who are now going to go into the pre-draft process. How about Aaron Casey, the superstar linebacker at IU, who accepted his invitation to play in the East-West Shrine Bowl? It's always fun to see all sorts of different stories once you get to the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, the Hula Bowl. You either get players like Casey, who played 1 million snaps for a team that didn't win many games, or you'll get really raw prospects. I'm a Bears fan, and Tyson Bagent came out of nowhere to get a Senior Bowl invite, and you're like, why is this D2 quarterback getting love in the Senior Bowl? And you saw him handle himself and then get snaps in the NFL this season. I love seeing the different stories building up to some of these postseason all-star games. I'm so happy to see Aaron Casey and Andre Carter get those invites. Totally deserved. DeKeese Carter also announced his intentions for the NFL draft. Mike Haddock as well. So very much looking forward to seeing some of these Hoosiers get announced. IU needs to start a new streak, Matt, as far as NFL draftees. So that's got to be a big priority here coming up for the 24 NFL draft. Very much looking forward to seeing how the Hoosiers fare there. But folks, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for The Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at The Hoosier Sound. Lastly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. Our next episode will be a recap of how the Hoosiers did against number 2 Kansas on Saturday afternoon. Big game. Can't wait to see how the Hoosiers fare against another legitimate top 5 opponent. Of course, Assembly Hall is going to be absolutely rocking. If you want basketball updates, football, you name it, the Hoosier Sound is your weekly one-stop shop for everything related to IU sports. Matt, the star conversation is one that a lot of people have had. And in fact, Tom Allen did do a terrible job as far as bringing in solid transfer, solid high school recruits. But let's face it, right? You see it in the NFL and you see it in college football. The biggest myth that exists in college football is that, you can't win if you're not one of the top 3 or 4 programs in the country.
Yeah, it's not true anymore.
I understand Michigan's undefeated, like tip of the cap to them, but that doesn't mean you can't do what Oregon State did over the last couple of years. Jonathan Smith now taking over at Michigan State. That doesn't mean you can't do what Kentucky and Duke and Kansas and Louisville have done. Jeff Brom turned around the Cardinals in a season.
I think
okay? And Jeff Brom didn't load up on 5-star recruits. By the way, you know who else didn't load up on 5-star recruits and is in the college football playoff?
Washington.
They have 0.
Mm-hmm.
0.
You don't have to get 5 stars. And that's not what I'm saying when I talk about recruiting rankings for IU. But I'm saying a tick up in recruiting rankings for IU shows excitement from a player's perspective on your program, right? And so that's what is the best indicator to the program is on an uptick in recruiting. So again, the sooner you can get that, the sooner the ball starts rolling, which is why I was so sure that Tom Allen was going to figure things out with IU because he was recruiting at a level that IU had never seen out of a football program. That showed me excitement. That showed me belief from a college football or a high school football player's perspective that they were believing what Tom Allen was preaching to them and what they were seeing on TV on Saturday, like all the rest of us were. Didn't work out that way.
There was one critical missing piece, though, Matt. And that's the problem for Tom Allen. And that ultimately led to the move over the last 2-3 seasons. Like, there was one critical missing piece. And that was Tom Allen lost his vision for what a successful football program looked like. That was the missing piece. You can get all the players you want. And I think you even see that right now with Texas A&M or Florida. Right? You can get all the players
very much
you
with
want.
Florida. Yeah.
But if you don't really have a vision, not just for 1 or 2 guys, we're talking about a vision for the 100-ish players on your roster, the 3 deep, you got to have a clear, detailed idea of what you're expecting out of each guy, not for just the upcoming season, 3-4 seasons down the road. It doesn't matter if the transfer portal is a big deal nowadays. It doesn't matter. But then you look at what actually happened at IU in 22 and in 23. Donaven McCulley barely got looks at wide receiver. EJ Williams stepped up, but wait, that started in week 9 at the wide receiver position. Indiana's starting running backs in the beginning of the year were Jalen Lucas and Christian Turner. What do we find out at the end of the year? It really should have been Josh Henderson and Trent Howland. That doesn't even get us to the quarterback spot where Brendan Sorsby started, then Taven Jackson played, and then Sorsby came back, and then it was all sorts of this, that is Michael Scott, snip, snap, snip, snap. And so
it was
Cignetti, if Cignetti brings that alone is worth, I don't know how many wins, but that vision matters in conjunction with the type of players you bring in.
Well, Tom Allen lost the vision of the football program, especially this last year, because he was panicking for his job. He was trying to find solutions out on the fly, and I think it kind of showed that if IU didn't have a talent advantage, a significant talent advantage on both sides of the ball, Tom Allen was not good enough of a football coach to make adjustments on the fly within his own team.
That wasn't even good enough against Akron.
He's just not good enough in general for a Power 5 college football level, let alone college football at all. Right? Remember, he hadn't been a college football head coach until he became IU head coach. He's been a coordinator.
Sig season's been one for what, 20 years?
So this is a guy that knows how to run a program. And, again, has worked with Nick Saban and has a staff that has worked with Saban and a bunch of other very high-level coaches. These guys know how to coach football. Okay? They do. Now, am I saying that Indiana is going to be competing for our college football playoff spot next year?
12 teams?
No.
12 teams, Matt?
No, not next year. But they can set themselves up so that in the future that they can be in the discussion for that. And I'm not saying that there's a very good chance that Indiana is when did the first college football rankings come out for the
Ooh.
playoff? It's like week 6.
I was gonna
right?
say like 6 or 7 or 8. Yeah,
I
whatever.
think it's week 6.
Mid-season, yeah.
I would not be surprised come week 6 if Indiana isn't somewhere in the discussion there, given
the
next
rankings.
year's schedule. That they'll be in the rankings, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're not like 15th or 14th, especially going into that Washington game at home.
How big do you think that UCLA road game is going to be in week 3? Right? Because
That's the season.
Indiana starts Florida International, Western Illinois at home.
Mm-hmm.
And then it really feels like you do have a swing game against Chip Kelly. Week 3, Rose Bowl. Cignetti from James Madison, who got shunned by the NCAA. He's going to lead a program into the freaking Rose Bowl. That's appointment TV, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, I'm serious. The season, the objectives for the season lie in the balance against UCLA. Because if you win that game, it'll probably it might be a ranked game. I think UCLA might be ranked at that point in time.
That's kind of a hot take too.
Yeah. I think that they will be. Especially with I've seen a lot of the transfers that they've been getting in into LA there. They're going to be pretty decent. And if you can win that game in the Rose Bowl, which by the way will also be an IU home game, in my opinion. I mean, the UCLA already doesn't show out football games in general, and IU football isn't that big of a draw. Like, it's not like it's Michigan coming to town, right? Like, and the people are like, oh, I get to watch UCLA play Michigan in the Rose Bowl. This will be fun. It's like, oh, no, Indiana. Like, we don't really care about Indiana all that much. But IU fans do. And IU has a very strong contingent of IU fans in Southern California.
I'll be there.
Right?
I don't know how I'll be there. There's no
Yeah,
question.
and then I've also heard that exact sentiment from I think almost every diehard IU football fan I know.
You're going to be 2-0.
You're going to be 2-0 with a chance to go 3-0 playing in the Rose Bowl against Chip Kelly. It's fun. If you win that game, you're 3-0, and then what are the next 3 games?
Charlotte at home.
Win.
Maryland at home. New quarterback.
We'll see.
It's at home. You know,
yeah, it's winnable.
Protect the rock.
Winnable. And
at Northwestern.
6-0.
At Northwestern, and then you go home Nebraska.
Should be a win. They're getting Kyle McCord as their QB.
Home Washington with what's his face taking snaps now?
Will
Rogers,
yes.
Is that right? I thought he was visiting somewhere else.
No, he committed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. If he lose to Washington, can't really complain.
But that's what I'm saying. If you look at IU's schedule, the 3 losable, like really losable games are Washington at home, still at home,
sure.
Michigan at home, still at home, Ohio State on the road.
Ohio State, yeah.
Those are the 3 games. All the other 9 games not only are winnable, but in my opinion, if IU finishes the offseason with who they want out of the transfer portal, those are more than just winnable. A lot of those are must-win games. Like Purdue looks like they're still not going to be good next year. They're slowly building.
Next year is such a big year for Purdue football. Just as far as, are you going to kind of get buried? Is Ryan Walters too ambitious following someone like Jeff Brom, who obviously elevated that program to high heights? Or, is Purdue buried? Or are they able to really sort of bounce back and lean back on their culture of, hey, you know what? We can actually build an explosive offense. We can really score touchdowns. We can really move the ball down the field, make a couple of big plays on defense, and bang, here we go, 9 wins. Purdue's on fire. Right, like I think Purdue, that's going to be such a fascinating matchup, the bucket game in 2024. But Matt, the question I have for you is, Coach Cignetti's obviously very confident in his ability to coach a football team, build a program, win some games. I mean, I understand he was an assistant at Alabama, but we're talking about a head coach at Elon, a head coach at James Madison. The Big Ten is different. right? Like, is this a little like this is a little too hot right now, isn't it? Like at some point, either Indiana's failures as a program or the degree of difficulty in the Big Ten is gonna catch up to Coach Sig. Am I wrong? Or like I mean, this feels like it's a little hot. I mean, what's still missing as far as IU football is concerned, and as far as how this stacks up in a Big Ten environment, what like where do we need to watch out here? Because Coach Sig is coming in hot.
He's coming in hot. Look, like there's still a lot of holes on this roster. You've lost your best defensive lineman.
Oof.
You're losing
Carter's
a significant chunk of your offensive lineman.
Aaron Casey's out.
And you're losing your best overall player. Right? So let's not kid ourselves. There's a lot of talent gone from this team.
Because like we know Florida International is going to be like they're going to be up like 17-10 at halftime, right? Like we know.
I don't know. I don't even want to begin to like try to ponder on that. But I just what I know is that Cignetti's going to go get his guys. He's going to be familiar with a lot of them. And I think that'll turn IU into about a 7 or 8 win team next year.
I really didn't think Carter Smith and Donaven McCulley would come back.
That's what I'm saying. With them not coming back, I thought that 6 wins is definitely possible. There's a lot of winnable games or whatever.
And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, maybe Khalil Benson comes back, maybe Trent Howland comes back, but of course those are a couple of guys that moved on. So that's kind of interesting to see how it all shakes out when it's all said and done.
That just shows me one thing and one thing only. That shows me the staff is prioritizing the guys that they feel like they can't replace.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right?
I completely agree. Yeah.
And they can't replace a left tackle that started as a freshman in the Big Ten. Yeah. That's not replaceable. You can't replace a 6'3", 6'4".
Oh yeah.
6'4" physical wide receiver on the outside that was basically the second best receiver in the Big Ten post week 6.
And all I'm gonna say is with Donaven McCulley, obviously a local player, Lawrence North High School. Like the one thing Indiana
recruit.
The one thing Indiana has actually done well over the last 20 years is get players like Donaven McCulley into the NFL and succeeding in the NFL. Your perimeter receiver, that's the only position where Indiana has consistently succeeded year after year after year after year. We had James Hardy in the NFL, the late, great James Hardy. Cody Latimer was a top 75 pick as far as the NFL draft was concerned. Nick Westbrook consistently gets on the Titans roster and does big things. He had a touchdown, then called back on Monday night against Miami, but the Titans still got the victory. Indiana's been, of course, doesn't even get into like guys who are a little more fringy, like Simi Cobbs, Donovan Hale, right? You're talking about guys who, out on the boundary, really made a big splash. To me, I want to see Indiana really build out that slot receiver a little bit more.
I want to use Jalen Lucas there. I was talking to a Penn State fan the other day, and they're like, "Hey, so Matt, I see we're targeting this this one guy named Jalen Lucas. He played running back, but the staff wants to use him as a slot receiver." And I damn near about threw hands at the world.
You know where he is this weekend? Jalen Lucas,
Happy Valley,
Louisville.
He's in Louisville. Oh God!
And all I'm saying is, if Jeff
Brom gets his hand on him, it's over.
That's Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, it's over.
Now, for me personally, I'd rather see that than see Jalen Lucas in the Big Ten. So
no, for sure. I'd rather not see him at Michigan or Penn State from just an IU perspective.
Nebraska,
right? Like I'd rather him go to
because we play Nebraska. We can't lose recruiting battles to Nebraska.
We can't lose players to teams that we play. That's all I'm saying. I did not like watching AJ Barner in a Michigan uniform this year.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, look, when it's all said and done, I think Coach Cignetti's coming in a little hot. I know for a fact that, when Indiana ultimately plays freaking Maryland at the Rock in week 5, it's going to be ugly. it's going to be one of those games where Coach Sig's going to have to maybe whip out a trick play. Of course, Mike Shanahan, Tino Sinceri, I know they're going to have to kind of dig deep into their bag of tricks. But the truth is, like, James Madison, when they were fully built out, right? We're talking before, the move was made and transfer portal happened, regular season, James Madison, it's October, November, James Madison. They would have beaten Indiana straight up. And I think they would have beaten about 6 or 7 in Big Ten teams straight up.
Yep.
I mean, on the road. I'm not even talking about games in the beautiful town of Harrisonburg, Virginia. I'm talking about true road games where, if James Madison went to Minnesota, I think James Madison would have won. If they went to Illinois, I think they would have won. They went to Purdue, I think James Madison would have won. So that's the type of thing where we're looking out of Coach Sig in year one. It's gonna be a wild ride. I don't know, Matt. When was the last time we talked IU football on December 15th? Like
2019.
So, that's where things are as far as Coach Cignetti is concerned. The Hoosiers bring back Carter Smith. They bring back Donaven McCulley. Hey, shout out Jordan Greer. You could see him pretty active on social media, defensive back. He was really the first one to recommit to Indiana out of the portal. And you're seeing him immediately reach out to players like Donaven McCulley and say, hey, let's run it back, man. And hey, whoa, as far as McCulley's concerned, that worked out. And so look, when it's all said and done, this is what you're seeing. We're gonna ask 1 or 2 final questions as far as IU football is concerned as we wrap up here. But first, it's time for our social media shout out. If you have not found us yet, head over to Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Find us at Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound. On Instagram, Matt, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
Exactly. Make sure you find us there. We're getting close to 10,000 followers on Twitter, folks. So if you like hot, hard-hitting analysis, I'm exaggerating. Make sure you give us a follow over on Indiana HQ. Hey, we got folks on site as far as these different games are concerned. We've done it for a few years here. We've seen a lot. We were churning out podcast episodes back when Indiana football was good, back in 2019 and 2020. So make sure you follow us. If you already do, tell a friend, tell a stranger. Doesn't really matter. Let us make sure they're able to give us a follow if they care about the IU athletics world. Matt, there's still so much, to think about as far as IU football is concerned. The truth of the matter is, right, this Indiana football team's gone out. They've brought back Carter Smith. They've brought back Donaven McCulley. They've added Curtis Schwark. What do you think is still the glaring weakness as far as this team is concerned? And I got 1 or 2 questions after that, but let's start with that.
Well, I mean, there's so many gaps. I don't even know where to start. But that's what happens when you have almost 20 players transfer out.
Yeah.
Right. So I will say I'm not going to say that this team has a weakness yet when most teams, especially most of the good teams, still have yet to play their bowl game. Or nobody's played a bowl game yet. JMU hasn't played their bowl game yet.
Yeah. Season starts tomorrow. I think it's Ohio and Georgia Southern.
Yeah.
The great Clay Helton, USC legend.
Anyways, I'm not gonna grade IU's offseason until probably January.
Okay, that's fair.
15th, a month from now. Give me a month from a month to now, and kind of look at things on paper. Then I can kind of give you a glaring weakness or whatever. I would say if I had to give you an answer right now, that would be offensive line. Like I mentioned that before in the podcast. But you do lose your best defensive lineman. You lose the best overall player at linebacker, Aaron Casey. So we'll see. But I mean, IU has shown the ability. I mean, again, it was under a different staff, but an ability to have an all-star-ish linebacker year after year after year. It doesn't really matter who it is, right? It was Aaron Casey.
Yeah.
It was.
But you know what? It also doesn't.
It was
really,
Micah McFadden.
It doesn't really matter as far as the results, right? I think that's what we learned. Right? You can have a great linebacker and win a lot of games. You can have a great linebacker and lose a lot of games.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that there might be a great linebacker on this roster right now, just waiting his turn to kind of go.
Sure.
that we don't really know about. And, it helps when you have a winning football coach.
I mean, let's talk about that, Matt, because that's the burning question for me, right? Like, I think a lot of us it's so easy now, thanks to the world of 24/7 sports and Rivals and ESPN, right? Like, okay, it's a 4-star prospect, 5-star prospect. This guy had offers from a bunch of Power 5 schools. That's what Donaven McCulley had. That's what Carter Smith had. How much, like, it's such a stupid question when you say it out loud, but how much does winning matter when it comes over from an FCS level to the Big Ten? Like, you know what I'm saying? Do we really feel like Coach Cignetti's mindset and his approach at James Madison, where they won a crap ton of football games, like at Elon, he transformed that program. That was a tougher turnaround than what Cignetti will deal with at Indiana.
Yes.
But at the same time, it was the FCS level.
Yeah.
Right? So,
I will say this. It is important to hire a head coach, Nithin, that has shown the track record to win big games.
Matt, I agree with you.
That is more important to me than a guy that can develop players. It's more important to me than a guy that can recruit
to me,
the heck out of
exactly. Bring in, the top Myles Garrett level recruits, right?
I mean, maybe it's because hindsight is 2020, and we just had probably the least clutch staff in all of college football. But I mean, all you have to do is go back and look at those IU teams of 2019 and 2020, and go watch the bowl games from those years. Those are not great coach. I mean, Lane Kiffin's a great coach.
Sure.
But Lane is not a clutch coach. Right?
Do we lose to Jeremy Pruitt or do we lose to Heupel?
We lost to Jeremy freaking Pruitt. Okay? And that is all you need to know about that situation. Both of those guys and their staff are not very well known for being able to clutch in big games, and were able to do so against Indiana because our staff was significantly worse than staffs that are one staff that was not good enough for USC, and one staff that was not good enough for Tennessee.
And I'm going to tell you one thing. Like, I actually do have kind of a soft spot for Tom Allen. I just think he swung and missed on his assistants so much.
He swung and missed on his assistants, but even when we had the 2019 bowl game, you had Caleb DeBoer, and you had
Kane Womack, right?
Kane Womack. Those were the guys that, in my opinion, carried him to the pedestal that he was put at in Indiana for the 2020 season. Right? Like that, those two guys absolutely lifted Tom Allen to heights that he probably should have never have gotten to in the first place, based off his own coaching philosophies and play calling and game management. There's no way he should have been there. The 2019 bowl game you lose because of game management. Straight up. Indiana wins that bowl game 9 out of 10 times the way they played. They lost it because the one time they didn't actually try to prepare for a very obvious onside kick. And then against Lane Kiffin,
we should have made a bigger deal about losing to Jeremy Pruitt.
Yes. In my opinion, that's the glaring mark to me that looking back, I should have sat there and gone, wait a minute.
In a game where we pick sixth, Jarrett Garantano, Jamar Johnson, I will never forget what a killer safety he was at IU.
I mean, it was such a good team. It was such a good team. They deserved to win that bowl game, and they lost it because the staff couldn't figure out, especially Tom Allen, couldn't figure out in-game, on-the-fly calls, right? Clutch calls. He was just unable to do that. Clock management, unable to do that. Throughout his entire IU, his tenure. The big games you think about winning, that Penn State game in 2020, right? They ended up underperforming all year. They were a bad team. Michigan in 2020, they were bad, underperformed all year.
They were.
Wisconsin, that game, Wisconsin underperformed that year, and they were not that good. And they don't even have the same head coach. So you go back and you look at all the games that IU had won in 2019 and 2020 that people
Michigan
called
State
big
shut
games.
them out, didn't matter. Rutgers shut them out, didn't matter.
No, exactly. They beat the teams that they were supposed to beat that year because they were bad. They did show up and played their butts
Oh,
off
yeah.
against
I
Ohio
mean, right.
State in a performance that I was very proud of, even though they lost, because that was a very good Ohio State team. But all that being said,
Yeah.
IU deserved to have been in bigger games than what they played in. They deserved to beat better teams based on the talent they had, and they should have clutched up in the big games. They had opportunities to progress and get better
Yeah.
at because of winning, and they didn't do any of that under Tom Allen because he wasn't a winning football coach.
And
He
I
just
think,
happened to luck into wins, and
and
there's
I
a
think,
very
yeah.
distinct difference between the two.
And that's where I think, you sort of, we talked about the lack of the vision. We talked about you're trying to patch up weaknesses, patch up errors rather than really try to build long-term solutions. And that's why I totally agree with your answer as far as, to me, your in-game management and your adjustments and your preparation and your vision, that stuff, I understand this might be the most boomer take of all time, but I love analytics, okay? And I love what the work that the recruiting folks do. That to me is very helpful in sort of getting sort of a preseason baseline as far as how teams are concerned.
Yep.
But with that said, like you don't have to be a PhD in football to know that the in-game management and the adjustments and the vision, that stuff makes a huge difference. At the end of the day, it's why Clemson struggled to win games this year, especially relative to the type of players that they brought in. That's why Jimbo Fisher is unemployed.
Shout out Jimbo for getting the bag.
Yeah, I mean, look, future Fishers, they are
They're
set.
set.
But
They are set. He can go. I'm proud of him. Jimbo can go hunting every single day he wants to go hunting. He lives on his ranch in Texas, and he could probably buy an oil field with the money he has currently.
Yeah. But to me, and I don't like, and I'm not gonna pick apart like fourth down decisions or 2-point decisions. Like at the end of the day, all that stuff, it kind of works itself out when it's all said and done. But if you're able to motivate your players, keep them locked in, earn their respect, make adjustments during games, prepare, build out game plans. How many times do we see this Indiana team look good for a half and look awful for a half over the last 2-3 seasons?
Again, that's just
That's
because
strictly back
coaching.
to the
It's just coaching.
And again, it spreads to the assistants, it spreads to everyone, but it's like that shows either a staff that in certain weeks game planned well, but didn't make those in-game adjustments. Or they game planned poorly and then did make some valuable changes during the middle of the game. I mean, I was in there. I was in the building when Indiana played Maryland earlier this season. We were down 44-7?
Yep.
Brendan Sorsby comes in, leads 2 touchdown drives, looks competent, looks capable. And then we saw what happened over the course of the season. Like, that's where I can sit here and believe that coaches have certain skills, have certain abilities that can lead to winning, even if they're not bringing in 5-star players. And that's what you're seeing at Kansas. That's what you're seeing at Duke, Arizona. Indiana hasn't beaten Purdue in a few years. Illinois looks like they've gotten back on track over the last 2 seasons. Northwestern won 7 freaking football games in 2023. And they didn't know who their coach was a month before the season started.
That's because they play in the West.
Matt, that's a little harsh. Okay.
It's not harsh. They play in the let's see how all the other West teams do now. They have to play an actual schedule. That's all I'm saying.
They beat Maryland.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I'm not saying that Maryland's a good football team. I will not say. I said they had some good players, and I was afraid to play them last year. But I will not sit here and tell you that Maryland is a good football team because they're not. It's like IU was not a good football team last year, but they had good players.
Sure. I mean, it was absolutely. I don't care if it's West. I don't care if it's East. I don't care if it's look. Northwestern won 7 games last year, and if you're telling me that Indiana can't do that, I have no interest in that argument. I really don't. I think Curt Cignetti can make this happen. I'm not saying Indiana's going to be a playoff team. I'm not saying Indiana's going to go undefeated. I'm not saying they're going to beat Michigan or Ohio State in 2024. But what I am saying is, if you have a coach that knows what he's doing as far as preparation for game day, as far as making those adjustments at halftime, as far as figuring things out on the fly, adding win probability to his football team, that's really what it comes down to when it's all said and done. And the Hoosiers were able to bring back Donaven McCulley. They were able to bring back Carter Smith. Matt, as we wind down here on this Friday night, any final thoughts here? Feel free to throw in a prediction for IU Kansas tomorrow. We'll recap the game fully and then look ahead to 3 cupcakes and then Big Ten play. What are your final thoughts here as we wind down on Friday night?
I mean, I think IU got. Well, now with Washington getting Will Rogers and Childs going to Michigan State,
Yeah.
I still think IU has one of the top QBs now in the conference.
Yeah. Experience helps.
Experience does help. Don McCulley coming back, I think he's instantly front runner to be one of, if not the best wide receiver in the conference next year. Given that Marvin Harrison Jr. probably is on his way to NFL, and so is Ibuka. And then, yeah, prediction for IU Kansas. I think IU actually wins.
Oh, God.
I think they win. I think the atmosphere is going to be too good for Kansas to overcome.
I thought we were going to beat Auburn. I literally went on this podcast last week and said we were going to beat Auburn.
I thought we should beat them too, but I genuinely think we're going to beat Kansas. I think we have to win one of these 2 games. I think they'll probably have gotten their asses kicked in practice over the last week. And I honestly think that Hunter Dickinson is going to have a hard time guarding Chloe Ware.
Wow.
Because Hunter's not very good on the perimeter. And you're going to drag him out to the perimeter.
Okay, that's fair. It's fair. I can't dispute that.
And I think that, again, IU fans don't really like Hunter Dickinson all that much. They're going to let him know that they still don't like him, even though he's at Kansas. And that's gonna be fun to watch, at the very least. But I do think IU ends up pulling it out probably like 76-75 in a thriller.
Wow. I got Kansas by 15.
I think I am actually. I would like to say this. My prediction is not made with a sane mind; it is made with pure copium. Okay, if I had to bet money, it would be Kansas to cover. That would be where the bet would.
I don't know. I don't think I would bet this game because Assembly Hall is weird. But
well, that's what I'm saying. If it was a neutral game, I would bet Kansas to cover. But because it's Assembly Hall, and I am coping at this point, hoping that we can salvage something from this season, I'm saying that IU beats Kansas and shuts up all the Purdue hate.
But we weren't even expecting this Kansas game to be that important because the thought was the Big Ten would have 3 good teams that you could somehow make up
they
ground.
Have 2
with.
Now.
It's
there's only 2 good teams.
And then of course the team that beats Purdue loses to Chicago State a week later.
Well, that's just college basketball.
No, it's not. Man.
Yes, it is.
Man. Yes. I mean, college basketball is like Indiana winning at Michigan and then losing by 30 to Auburn. College basketball is not Northwestern under the same roof.
Yeah, but Chicago State's not as bad as they once were. I would like to point that out. Chicago State is not as bad. When you say somebody loses to Chicago State, that sounds like they just lost to a D3 basketball team. Because at a certain point,
they were a D3 basketball.
They were worse. And I would go on a limb and say that they might have been.
They would have lost to our friends at UIndy.
Correct. They will not lose to UIndy anymore. Now, are they a top 100 KenPom team? No, absolutely not. But they are pretty decent for how bad they were a couple of years ago.
Fair.
Still, it does no excuses for Northwestern. I'm not making excuses for Boo Booey. I'm not making excuses.
We're not. And,
But
and you know what this is. You know what this is going to be. We're not going to beat Northwestern this year, man. Like that's going to be
going to cook us. Unless Xavier Johnson comes back, Boo Booey is going to absolutely cook us.
That's the killer. Now, like in IU's defense, the only time you played Northwestern this year is at home, so maybe you atone for your sins last year. But
that's a heart crushing Boo Booey buzzer beater incoming. Because that guy becomes Kobe in the clutch. It's crazy.
Except against Chicago State, makes you think. Because I watched it. He missed. I think multiple good looks at the end, and I was like, "What is?"
Hey! Michael Jordan missed shots too.
Not against Chicago State.
No, you just missed them.
We didn't get that opportunity. We didn't get the answer. Right. Shout out, Dockage. As far as I'm concerned, look, I am buying into what Coach Cignetti is selling, because if you go into a phone call or into a meeting with Carter Smith or with Donaven McCulley and get them to come back to Indiana, the new coaching staff, instead of quickly accepting an offer from an SEC school or from another Power 5 program, especially another Big Ten competitor.
Yep.
That to me says that Curt Cignetti knows what he's doing as far as some of these high-profile recruiting battles. I don't know what that means, but if you're asking me today, I think it's kind of bowl game or bust for Indiana in 2024. Maybe I change my mind in a month. As far as IU basketball, again, I don't think they're going to handle Kansas all that well. If the Hoosiers out-rebound Kansas, which actually is possible, Kansas is a bit shaky from a rebounding standpoint, they have a chance. So, if you listen to this on Saturday morning before the game, I do think if Indiana out-rebounds Kansas, they'll have a chance to get the win. With that said, I think this team needs the 3 cupcakes coming up to straighten some things out before Big Ten play. Kansas to me is a little bit too much to ask right now. If it was a little bit of a different program, maybe if you were able to get like Texas at home, or if you're able to get Tennessee at home, or if you're able to even get this year's Kentucky team at home, I would have said, hey, maybe Indiana can get the win. I think Kansas is asking a little bit too much, but I will gleefully accept my L around 2:30 or 3 o'clock Eastern time here on Saturday. So I'm curious. I am intrigued about IU football in December of 2023 after a 3-win season. That's where things are at. But folks, that about wraps it up for our 318 show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation. We will see you next time.
Peace and love, go Hoosiers.